Welcome to the Education Insights Focus on Behavior podcast. We're here to talk about all things behavior in the world of education. We take the science of behavior and break it down for educators into easily implementable steps, and we're excited to spend some time with you. Get ready to talk through behavior, what works, what doesn't work, and how we can all improve our work in schools so we as educators can be more fulfilled and our students can be more successful.
Hello, welcome back to Education Insights Focus on Behavior. I'm your host, Dr. Selena Layton, and I am joined by my co-host, Daniel Irwin. Hey, Daniel.
Hello.
And Dr. Daria Lorio Barston. Hi, Daria.
Hi, everyone.
And as always, we're happy to have producer Emily Muse. Hi, Emily.
Hello there.
So I thought today we would start with a little conversation about things that we struggle with or things that have been harder to learn than maybe we feel like they should have been. What are your thoughts? What are things that you feel like you should be better at than maybe you are?
I've been playing the guitar a very long time, since like middle school, probably on and off, and I'm not good at it. And I mean, I can play songs, I know chords, but like when it comes to music theory or moving my fingers real fast, can't do it. Um, and it's been a whole thing.
So it's drawing noses for me. I know it's a very
That is
niche
oddly
thing.
specific.
It is very specific because I can do like a decent sketch of a face, except for the nose. I can never get the nose right, and I have tried different techniques, and I don't know if at this point of time it's now in my head, and I, pun intended, and I really struggle with this because I've experienced failure so often. But that is a very oddly specific thing where I feel like other facial features, I am perfectly fine, but drawing a nose, unless it's the profile, is a challenge.
All right. Well,
Oh, what
mine,
do you mean, all right? What about you?
what about me? Mine is following directions and like car directions, right? Like someone will be like, this is how you're going to go someplace. And especially if they have the audacity to use cardinal directions, like you're going to turn north or you're going to go 3.4 miles and turn southeast. I have no idea how that works. I follow directions by like, you're going to pass by this sign and then there's, a McDonald's and then that's how I get to places. To the point of like I used to work in a large school district that had schools all over the place, and I wasn't familiar with the area. The night before, I would sit down with my calendar and I would print out MapQuest directions. And yes, I'm aging myself as I tell this story, but I would print out MapQuest directions so that I knew how to get not only to the school, but from each school to the next. And if my calendar changed, like I was in big trouble because I did not know how to do it. And then, thank God, there was the invention of the GPS. And that made a world of difference in my life because then it tells me turn by turn where I'm supposed to travel. Although every once in a blue moon, I tell the GPS that they're wrong and then, go from there. But thank God for those supports. So how have you all kind of coped with your challenges here?
I took lessons a long time ago when I was a child, and it didn't speak to my brain, right? Like the way these lessons were, there was this very specific method called the cage method, and it was like if you play a C here and then you move it up 3 frets, it becomes an A. That's not even right. Maybe it is. See, it doesn't work. It didn't stick, and it was very focused on like this theoretical piece of it. And I've noticed recently, my son is a musician. He wrote the theme song for this podcast. He's a musician, and this is something that works in his brain really well. That when we play together, he can kind of figure it out. I can watch him figure it out, which then gives me, I guess, more context for how to play the song, and I can see him do it, and he can tell me what I'm doing wrong and make sure I'm like maintaining a rhythm. And I don't know what the specific thing is aside from we know each other really well. So maybe that information is coming to me in a different way. He's showing me like finger positions or like giving me the rhythm through like vocalizations or whatever else. And so I found that has been really helpful for me in learning and then actually remembering songs over time.
Kind of sounds like intensified instruction.
It's specially designed. Yeah.
I was going to say, it sounds like a very personalized, one might say, tier three intervention, Daniel.
It might be. And he certainly, oh, I had a joke there, but now I can't remember it. He's a very kind teacher most of the time. But I can also see like how frustrated he gets when I can't get something, or like it's like things that are like really repetitive. I lose it somewhere along the way because I start thinking about, oh, I just did that right 4 times, and then I mess it up because on the fifth time I'm thinking about how I'm celebrating already that I got it right 4 times in a row, and then it falls apart. So I can see he's a very good teacher for me, but I can also see how frustrated he gets when things aren't happening the way they should.
Maybe it's karma. I know sometimes my kids get frustrated when I teach them too. So, well, actually, as Daria alluded, that kind of brings us back to a conversation that we had on a previous episode where we were talking about.
Daria,
Yes.
have you given up on noses?
I mean, I haven't given up on noses, but it is an unresolved issue. And I will say that while I think it is really a cool experience when your kids become the age that they can teach you the skills that you don't have yet, and I love having that shift when I'm learning from my kiddo a lot these days as well. Drawing noses is not a secret skill of his either. So I think I'm gonna have to seek my own interventions to figure out how to remedy this very serious issue in my life.
It has probably been holding you back from success, both personally and professionally.
That's the one thing. The
This
one
skill
thing
deficit.
Daria could just master the nose drawing.
That's right. I mean, clearly, I suffer greatly, Daniel, as a result of a lack of the skill.
You'll get there. You'll get there. And Selena, you've got GPS now,
I
but
do.
is there a thought towards developing maybe some more independence away from these supports?
So interestingly, the GPS actually causes a little overdependence because not only I follow the GPS, but now, even when I know where I'm going, I still turn it on because it will tell me if there's traffic or it will tell me if I should go different ways. So, no, actually, there is no thought of creating my own independence. However, what it has actually done is made me more independent from how I used to have to support myself through this. And now I won't tell the story about how I had to call someone one time and be like, I have no idea where I am. And I can't even to describe to you where I'm at. And I don't know how to get home, which did happen before I had GPS. So it makes me a safer person, or at least it makes me safer knowing that I can at least always get home.
Listen, I think GPS is one of those interventions that should not ever be faded because I very much appreciate it. And I know that I am a much less kind driver when my GPS is not working and when I have to navigate things. I will tell you that the amount of stress I experience too when I don't have access to GPS definitely is much greater than when I do. And I think as long as our success criteria is not to be Michael from The Office when he drives into the lake because his GPS told him to turn left, I think we are all successful, albeit unable to draw noses, individuals.
So I think that kind of takes us to what we're actually going to talk about today, which, if you didn't join us on our last episode, we were talking about multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS. And we spent some time kind of walking through the different tiers and how that works. And just a very, very brief overview, tier one supports are those foundational universal supports that should be present for everybody. They're good classroom practices, good instruction, good behavioral practices that are evidence-based and put in the classroom. Tier two supports are really intended to intensify that for some children who may need a little more support. So not everybody receives tier two supports, but if children are not as successful as we want them to be, they may need some more either slightly individualized or at least more intensive supports or instruction in order to be successful. And then tier three supports are when children, a very few amount of children, really do need specially designed instruction or very uniquely personalized instruction to meet their unique needs. Separate from special education, which is its own kind of separate piece where children receive specially designed instruction based on the unique needs of their disability. The other, I think, big takeaway from last time that I just want us to remember, because this is going to influence our conversation today, is that children are not labeled by tiers, but they may have needs in each and all of the tiers at any particular time, but they don't stay in those tiers forever, hopefully, or our interventions probably aren't being successful as we want them to be. And so if a child does need to receive tier three intervention for a little while in a specific area, they may not need it in all areas. But hopefully once those interventions are successful in supporting that kid, then they would not need to receive that intensive level of supports anymore. So Daniel, Daria, anything I missed from last time we need to hit on before we move into today?
I think you did a great job.
Thank you. All right. So then today, what we wanted to spend some time talking about is how do you move through those tiers in kind of a seamless way? And so I think sometimes there is vagueness around when does the child really need tier two or tier three supports, and then when do they not need those supports anymore? So I want to start out the conversation with how do you make decisions around moving from one tier to another for any particular intervention that's required?
Yeah, so Selena, I think that's a great question. And I think it's sometimes one that we are not as thoughtful as perhaps we should be when we create entry and exit criteria, and when we create those decision rules and actually keep to those decision rules, right? Because based on any intervention that we're trying to put in place, we have to be thoughtful about the design as to what are the pathways, both in and out of those interventions, so that the students are receiving the support that they need and that they are not remaining in having more support than they actually need. And that's not coming from the place of, well, let's just give the minimum support to the students, but it is coming from the place of we want to be mindful when our students don't become completely dependent on the interventions. And kind of to the earlier conversation about the GPS, right? We want them to be successful, confident drivers, but we don't want them to not ever be able to operate a vehicle if it doesn't come with a GPS system. So kind of thinking along those lines, we preferably, as MTSS committees who design and monitor and take data on the interventions, are very clear about what is our entry criteria, what are our exit criteria, and how do we monitor data and how do we check in to tell when interventions are working, when potentially we need to increase or decrease the interventions the students are receiving.
And I think to that point, really thinking about the specificity of what the student is showing for that entry criteria. And at that time, as you're thinking about, we've put these strategies in place, we put these interventions in place, and we know they need a little something more. We need to maybe think about tier two or tier three interventions, that we go back to that thought that they're not tier two, tier three kids. They have some tier two, tier three needs. And the more specific we can be about that, the easier it is to sort of identify what that criteria for entry and exit is, because we know what the challenge is that we're addressing. We're not sort of looking at everything all the time.
So when a child requires pretty intensive supports in order to be successful, what kinds of things should we be thinking about as we start putting those supports in place so that we know at some point, hopefully they won't, and not only hopefully, because we don't want to just hope, but to plan that those supports may not need to be in place forever?
I think really thinking about how it ties back to what's happening with tier one, whether it's shared language, shared expectations, shared structures, whatever, that that there's actually a connection between tier two and tier one and tier two and tier three so that our language is the same, expectations remain the same, and when we can support kids to sort of get closer to what those tier one expectations are or being responsive to what those tier one interventions are for everybody, we've got to shape that down a little bit, right? Like we really got to think about if it's a check in, check out, how can that be shaped down into something that fits more naturally, kind of into the classroom on a day-to-day basis. So that's one thing that I kind of think about a lot.
Yeah, I think this is where our principle of fading comes in, right? It's how do we design a plan? And Selena, I loved how you said like that we hope and also we plan, right? We can do both at the same time. How do we design a plan to gradually remove levels of assistance while students remain successful in performing their skills independently? And similarly to what Daniel is saying, how does that align to tier two or tier one interventions? I think the more we can think about what is most likely to resemble a natural environment or what's most likely to resemble what future life will look like for our students, I think that helps with that plan, right? Because I don't know about you, but I remember having this really big aha moment as a teacher when I had students in my classroom that at the time was a self-contained classroom, and parents would watch the students do a skill and say, well, they don't do it for me at home. And I remember thinking, this is a failure on my part to help the students generalize the skills and try to figure out how to remove some supports, because if our students are able to do a skill successfully only in one setting or in that particular case with one specific individual, that's not that's really far from the goal of where we're trying to go, right? And so I think we have to design and think about the long term of what will independent success look like, so then we can gradually fade some of those supports or interventions, whatever it looks like within the MTSS triangle.
Yeah, and I love that what you said about the natural environment and being funny but not being funny. Going back to my GPS example, like I have no intention to fade my use of the GPS, but the great news is it doesn't depend on anybody else. I control it. I can make it work for me. And so it is a natural support because I can manage it on my own. And so sometimes when I think about how we build these plans is you may need some pretty intensive instruction or supports to get this set up, to get it working in your life. But then I can turn the control over to the student, like visual supports. I have a checklist for myself, right? I write myself a to-do list every day. Now, kids I work with may not be ready to write their own. I may have to support that and provide that at first. But over time, we want to teach that skill so they can do that on their own. Because guess what? You can provide your own visual support every single day of your life if you want to, because you can control that and be independent with that.
And to your point of you get to choose which interventions you are using, right? I think sometimes, as well-meaning adults who have educational backgrounds, we are really great at selecting interventions that are not a really great match for students because students hate them, so they won't actually use them. And so I think part of this decision making and part of this exit and entry criteria as well, we have to account for students' voice and choice within that as well, so that we are matching, particularly as we get to the tier three interventions, so that we are matching students' preference to a certain degree or their learning profiles with something that is beneficial, right? And to the point of the GPS, I think here's another really important skill to have. And while, yes, I agree with you, I have no, I have GPS in the car, I have a GPS on my phone, I have a GPS and a backup GPS. But I also think that at this point of time in our development, even if you didn't have GPS, you have a plethora of other skills. Would you like to use them? No. Do you love having to go into the gas station and ask for actual directions? No, it's not the preferred intervention, but you have a menu of skills that if you were in dire need and your GPS froze, you also have an ability to do that. So part of the interventions I think that we need to think about is helping our students have a plan of what to do if the intervention is not available or for reasons outside of their control just cannot happen, right? What are kind of our problem solving skills? What are some of our backup plans? Because I'm sure we have all known kids who really struggle with some changes in their schedule. And if their reading specialist is not there to provide the intervention that they're used to getting every day, it can throw a wrench to the whole day. So I think there are a lot of considerations that I think we have on paper considerations as entry exit criteria as to who is a great candidate for each interventions and all of those kind of theoretical aspects, but then I think the practical aspects we also have to think about as to when this doesn't work, when this is not available, what happens then, right? Or what happens if the student is just on paper, it seemed like this would be a great match, and in reality, it's not working. Like, and I think about check and connect or check in, check out that are all interventions that I absolutely adore. But if you have a mentor that has a disconnect with a kid, it's not going to work, right? And so those are the things that from our planning stages, from our design, we have to be mindful about how do we build systems that actually support kiddos.
And to that point, Daria, helping kids recognize those strategies ahead of time and almost take that proactive approach themselves. So if you're using a GPS and you know you're going to be going through Southwest Virginia and service might be spotty, do you save that to your phone, right? Do you eat, right? Like you make it available offline, you do those kinds of things, knowing kind of the environment you're going into. And I think if we can get kids thinking through, especially as they're moving into going to college or moving into the workforce and graduating high school, um, starting to think about the utility of those supports that they have available and what they're going to look like, and give them some perspective around environments that are not as supportive as a comprehensive school would be, right? Like when you think about what's happening day to day in a school, whether tier one supports are in place perfectly or not, there's so much structure that kids live within those, 6, 7 hours of school. The bell rings at this time. You have 4 minutes to get to your next place. When you get to that class, here's the expectations for that class. The bell's going to ring again. You've got 4 minutes to get to your next place. Like, dun, 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 dun. Teachers are there, and for it's sort of a double-edged sword sometimes. With as teachers, we want kids to be successful, right? We want them to succeed and get good grades and do the work and buy into it and be motivated by it and all of that. And sometimes we have to kind of take that step back and say, okay, how is this going to work next year, right? When I'm not there to remind them to write down their homework, when I'm not there to help maybe de-escalate when something's gone wrong in the classroom, am I building those skills in that student to be able to apply them next time? Are we building a skill base as opposed to just supporting and preventing all the time?
Daniel, I think you bring up really, really good points. And I think, I think it's important to acknowledge that creating the plans for the students within all three interventions um, is more complicated than it at first appears, right? There are lots of variables, there are a lot of moving pieces, and I think it's a lot to think about, which is why I think it's very important to have teams of folks who make these decisions with different areas of expertise, including the area of expertise in the area of behavior, to help be thoughtful in order to make these decisions well-rounded.
So it sounds like we've been able to kind of talk through this. Hopefully this has been helpful, and I think we are reaching the point of our unpaid ad for the day. So Daria, I think you're going to talk to us about our resource that we want to share.
I sure am. So I want to give out shout out to the Virginia MTSS. And VTSS specifically is what it's called. So I believe that the tagline is VTSS is who we are, MTSS is what we do. But we do have Research Implementation Center at Virginia Commonwealth University, who have the Virginia Tiered Systems of Support Center. And they are a group of wonderful professionals who are very mindfully trying to create spaces online, virtually, where you can find a lot of resources, a lot of opportunities for ongoing professional development, a lot of modules where you can learn more around and about MTSS. One of my favorite things, and so the website actually is VTSS RIC Center. I'm sure Emily will put it in the notes. But one of my favorite features of that website is the new section that is being developed. It's called VTSS Resource Hub. And I think it is great. So if you're listening and if you want to check out some cool resources of what some other school districts in Virginia are doing, you have some samples there. If you have something that you're doing that you think is a great example of how to do this well, please make sure you submit your information to the Resource Hub as well, because it's intended to be kind of the center where folks can share the resources so that we all are working smarter and more efficient with this sometimes very complicated work. But the VTSS RIC Center is a fantastic website for any and all of your learning needs around MTSS.
And just to add in there, if you're not in Virginia, you can still access the resources on the website, and I think they're still really valuable. So thanks, Daria, for sharing. And as always, Daria, Daniel, thank you for being with me today.
Always a fun time.
Always a pleasure.
And Emily, thank you for your help.
Thank you.
And we will see you all on our next episode.
Thanks for listening to Education Insights Focus on Behavior. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can join the conversation by emailing us at cbis@odu.edu, visiting www.cbisva.org, or following us on Facebook, Instagram, X, or Blue Sky at CBISVA. Special thanks to the Virginia Department of Education for their support of this project.